There was a story that I talked about this past week in Newswave, and I wanted to elaborate on it a little bit more and take a look at the chip itself in the PlayStation 5, as there are a lot of concerns right now, I see it online, as to how you should set up your PS5, because all of them are breaking and drowning in liquid metal, and we'll cover that a little bit here today, and why you probably don't have anything to worry about if you've been playing your PS5 really at all. So if you guys enjoy the video, make sure you like it and subscribe if you're new to the SpawnWave Plus channel. First of all, we have to go over here and take a look at the chip itself. This is on the PlayStation 5. It's a zoomed in view of the chip. You can see the liquid metal here directly in the middle. It's very shiny and reflective, and Sony decided to go with this rather than just a standard thermal compound like what we see in the Xbox Series X and the Series S. Part of that has to do, I'm sure, with what they experienced with the PlayStation 4 Pro, which was a very poor cooling setup. The fan curve was out of control at times. The thing wanted to take off into orbit, and Sony realized, hey, if we're going to make something that people may use for, I don't know, watching movies or Netflix or what, I mean, my PS4 Pro just goes off constantly. I had to do a lot of work to at least get the fan curve to flatten out a bit. And yeah, that did include me putting liquid metal on the thing. So there you go. But obviously, they wanted to go back to the drawing board. Mark Cerny specifically talked about this during one of his keynotes, and it seemed that they decided, hey, we're going to overclock this chip, or push the clock speed up, I should say, on this chip. We're going to go with liquid metal. We don't want any bottleneck between the die and the heat getting out of the system. We've also saw, I would say, an over-engineered heatsink inside of the system, as they've proven that they can, yes, shrink down the heatsink and it actually performed better at times. Part of that also has to do with them revising the chip and the fabrication and what have you. But the biggest thing here is you can see the liquid metal in the middle, and then you have what looks like foam almost around the outside here. So this whole section is a bunch of foam. That is the seal that presses up against the heatsink, and it's very porous here, but when it's all screwed together, that makes essentially a seal. All that compresses together, and the idea is to block off any possible leakage from the liquid metal. For the amount of liquid metal that Sony put in there, it's more than I would put on. I'll say that for a chip. Like, I was a little surprised by how much was in there. They certainly realized, you know what? We should probably make sure this highly conductive material can't find its way onto the board. Now, recent reports have stated that some of these PS5s have been opened up, and they found that the liquid metal has spilled out onto the board, which has led people to really try to, I guess, rethink the way that they have their PlayStation 5 setup, which basically means you're going to rethink the way you have your entire living room set up, because it's a big system, right? So there are a lot of people who heard that having it vertically is the worst way to have it, and you want to have it horizontally. And I believe the idea is, hey, if you're not fighting gravity for liquid metal running down the side and onto the board, you're probably in better shape overall. However, the more I've really thought about this and some of my experiences with liquid metal, if you've had your PlayStation 5 on and running and you've used it up until this point and you're hearing about this a year later, to be honest, you're probably fine. And the reason I say that is because liquid metal does react to other metals. In fact, if you use it for aluminum, it becomes a serious problem. There are many people, you can go on all kinds of different forums and subreddits, where their CPU is seized to the heatsink because they used liquid metal on an aluminum block, and it'll actually almost merge to it. It's pretty wild stuff if you leave it there over time. But basically, you really say it's a burn-in period for it, but as liquid metal, it reacts, heat being added to the equation accelerates its reaction. And when I took my PS4 Pro back apart to check up on the liquid metal, it was crystallized just about. It wasn't even liquid anymore. It was a year later. It's not supposed to be in the PS4 Pro. So yeah, compared to the PS5, where it's been engineered to be in with this barrier, I mean, I'm curious as to what my PS5, the liquid metal will look like in a year or so. Because remember, I did reapply the liquid metal in my PS5, which, by the way, it's been running great this whole time. Never had an issue, never really even heard the fan. Now, if you look at the barrier they placed, this is another part where they didn't really skimp out, and this is from iFixit. If you ever open up your PS5, never take this barrier off, and you're about to see why. For really the liquid metal, you can see how much was applied here by Sony, but it spills up onto the plastic here that they have as the barrier just before it hits any of this kind of foam substance. And then we can see what the chip looks like without it. Those are all components around the chip that liquid metal can affect because it is like completely conductive. The thing with thermal compound, your MX4s, your Arctic Silvers, any of that, it's supposed to be non-conductive, as in you can get it on the board and it won't actually damage the board. Liquid metal, the most dangerous part about it is the application, getting it onto the chip without spilling it anywhere else. Because if it gets on the board and you power your system on, or if it gets on components on the chip here and it powers on, you can short and just damage the board completely, which not an ideal thing to see. So Sony did kind of go above and beyond when you look at the way that they set up this chip with this barrier. So the thing that people would, I guess, have a case to be concerned about is out of the box. So if you get a PS5 and you take it out of the box and it doesn't work, there is actually a possibility the liquid metal got out of it. And I say that because while they do, I'm sure they do cycle and test these systems pretty well as they come off of the factory line before they go out to stores, there is a chance that the liquid metal hasn't reacted or any of this, and it could show why people are opening up PS5s and seeing this. I'm really just trying to come up with a scenario as to why we are seeing PlayStation 5s do this. And from what I can tell, it's a couple of them. It's not a substantial amount to where we are in red ring territory right now. So while there are cases like this, it does still at this time fall into the defective percentage that we see with a lot of products, especially electronics and especially game consoles, where the margins are razor thin and they're trying to stuff a ton of technology in these little boxes, little being relative to the PlayStation 5 itself. But the fact that people are so concerned that they are questioning how their PS5 is set up, to be honest, inside your PS5, the liquid metal is most likely not at risk of running anywhere, even if it's vertical, upside down, or whatever. So, and out of the box, you would have some sort of warranty through Sony, so you would have to ship it off and get it back, or probably even just take it right back to the store you got it at, most likely earlier in that day, as you just found out it doesn't work. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. You know, I'm really curious if people have had issues with their PlayStation 5, specifically if it's freezing or overheating. I think overheating might be the signal that there's something up with your liquid metal. I mean, it should be, because that's what's making the connection between the die and the heatsink. And my question isn't necessarily the liquid metal running over time. It's actually how it will hold up over time in terms of the connection to the die and the heatsink, because I have seen what happens to liquid metal after a year or two. So how will the PS5 look 5 or 6 years down the line? Some people have to open up their system every year or two to reapply liquid metal. So I'm curious to see how the PlayStation 5 lines up towards the end of the generation, when maybe I'll open mine up to see. But let me know what you guys think about this one down below. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you next time.